I was born in Idaho. I grew up in a Christian family. Both my grandparents were senior pastors of their own churches. And so we grew up in that kind of church environment. And I think, as many kids do, very much relied on my parents' faith. It wasn't because of a strong relationship with God, because I didn't know that was possible. I knew that God knew everything about me because he's God, but how can you know anything about him other than what he'll tell you in the Bible? And that didn't seem like much to my 10-year-old mind. When I was praying, I would tell God jokes. And I just figured he might like to hear them. I would talk, and I would hope that someone was listening and that someone was interested. But that was kind of it. It was like being on the phone with someone who had picked up and then laid the receiver down. When I was about 18 or 19, really start questioning whether that guy ever actually came back in the room where that handheld was. And maybe had it even been picked up in the first place. And I was sitting there going, what is the point of this? Because I walked away from God for 6 years. Never stopped believing in the idea of God, but I thought, I'm not going to find him here. One of my friends called me up and said, hey, want to go to New Zealand? We're going to be actors. When are you leaving? And they said 3 weeks. And I went, okay. And so I came here. And I was just trying to live my own life and just do what I thought was fun and going to fulfill me and be interesting for me. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be fulfilled. It's just that the way that I was going about it and the things that I started trying to fill my life with were not necessarily good. And I became a much worse version of that happy little kid. I started wondering whether or not life had a point, and going down that suicidal trail. Eventually I started thinking, wasn't I happier once? Wasn't there a time when I actually enjoyed my life? And I started trying to think about when that was. And I was able to trace it back to when I lived with my parents. Really thought, okay, what was it about living there that made that better? And eventually I thought, you know what it was? It was the way they lived. It was that I lived under the roof of my mother, who loved, believed in, followed, and served her God. And I thought, I got nothing to lose. I'll give it a shot. And I started praying, and I just started talking and telling him how I was feeling, and I ended up coming to City Impact Church. And that was church like I hadn't seen it before. It looked more like a concert. And they weren't trying to put on a show. They were just excited, and they didn't care who saw it. And that really got my attention. And I thought, if I'm gonna find out about God, it's gonna be here. The pastor got up there, and when he was preaching, it was like he had a camera in my room and had been taking notes, right? And I was just kind of sinking deeper and deeper in my seat going, look away, felt like he was talking just to me. And I thought, okay, God, if this is you, then you've got me, and I'm not a halfway person. That decision changed me fundamentally, and I felt like, for the first time in over 6 years, the sky just had big hinges and just opened, and like before it'd been maybe beating on brass type thing. When I first came back to Christ, I called Mom. They were stoked that I had found my own faith. And they used to ask, so when are you coming home? And I told them, Mom, Dad, this is where God planted me. This is where God speaks to me. Until he says different, I am home. Most recently, I've been teaching. I ask them hard questions, and I demand answers. God did not give us something so complicated as a brain in order to demand that we check it at the door in order to join his little club. Right? He wants us to question and ask about him and find out that there are answers, and that we're not always going to understand them, but we don't have to. We're made in his image, not the other way around. And I just want to see what they come up with, and I want to get them thinking, and I want to get them realizing that God is interested in them seeking him. And so I get to teach them that, get to talk to them about how to take ownership for their own spiritual walk, for their own Christian life, and how to talk to people who have different questions, because what does happen? Eventually, someone's going to come along and go, why do you believe what you believe? Why aren't you an atheist? Why aren't you any number of things? And how do you respond to that? Do you have to have an answer for everything? I don't think so. Not right away. But you do need to know what you believe and why. That's true for everybody.